The first thing I'm going to show you is the code running with family 0 dataset. To give you some context, what we want to know is which is the probability that a person has a gene which is associated with hearing loss. This gene is transmitted to a child from their parents, from his parents. Other thing that we could say that is a person could have 0, 1 or 2 copies of the gene, and each parent gives you one copy of a gene that could be or not associated with the hearing loss. Here in this example we have the previous data that we have is that Harry is James and Lily's son, and we know that James has the trait and Lily hasn't. The implementation of Heredity calculate these probabilities, and what we could see here is because Lily hasn't the trait, it's more likely that she hasn't any copy of the gene. She could have a copy, but it's more likely that she hasn't. James, in another hand, if you could see here, he has the trait. So it's more likely that he has a copy of the gene associated with hearing loss. It's not certain, but it's a high probability, the highest. Having this information, we could see Harry's values, Harry's probabilities. Here we could see that it's not very likely that he has 2 copies of the gene, because if we could see here, the highest probability in Lily's is that she hasn't a copy of the gene, so she could not transmit to her son a copy with that gene, because if she hasn't. So it's not likely to have, Harry is not likely to have 2 copies. He could have 1 or he could have 0, depending of James' probabilities, but it's not likely to have 2. It could happen, but it's difficult. Given these results, we could see that it's more likely to have it hasn't the trait that he could have the trait. It's more likely that he hasn't. We have 2 more examples. The next one is family 1. Here, what we know is that Charlie, Fred, Ginny, and Ron are Molly's and Arthur's children. Children. Another thing we could see here is Arthur hasn't the trait, Charlie hasn't the trait. The only one who has the trait is Fred, who we are certain that he has the trait is Fred, and we know that Molly hasn't. So all except for Fred are more likely to have 0 copy of the gene, if we see here. But Fred, because we know he has a trait, is more likely to have at least one copy of the gene. And the last example is family 2, and here is exactly as before. Arthur and Molly are Ron's parents, and Hermione and Ron are Rose's parents. And we can see here the results of the implementation.